Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Gnarly Data Waves. I'm Alex Brissett. I'll be your host this evening, or this morning, depending on where you are. But today we're going to be talking about an amazing topic here on episode 27 on how Maersk is building a next-gen data lakehouse with Dremio. But before we get started, of course, there's our obligatory announcements on all sorts of really cool things, such as getting your hands on the Data Lakehouse platform, on the Dremio Data Lakehouse platform, so you can see how easy it makes a data lakehouse experience, how open that experience is, how fast that experience is, and all the value that the Dremio data lakehouse platform can bring you. All you have to do is go to dremio.com, click on test drive, and you can try it out with no cost, no obligation. You just get hands-on. But also make sure to pick up an early release copy of Apache Iceberg, the definitive guide. Okay, we're constantly releasing new chapters of the book, so do scan it. If you scanned in before, scan it again to see if any new chapters have arrived. Just scan that QR code right there. And of course, here at Gnarly Data Waves, we're constantly trying to bring you great, insightful content on all sorts of great things around the data lake, data lake house, and data in general. So over the next coming weeks, we got Apache Iceberg offers hours next week. So if you got Apache Iceberg questions, we got Apache Iceberg answers. We're going to be talking about simplifying data governance at scale across all your data, August 22nd, using Dremio and DuckDB together, ELT, ETL, and the Dremio data lakehouse. And it's time for an even easier data lakehouse. Learn what's new in Dremio. So lots of great topics coming up in the coming months. So keep checking in. And again, when you can join us live on a Tuesday, make sure you subscribe either by subscribing to the Dremio YouTube channel at youtube.com/Dremio or on Spotify. Just look up Gnarly Data Waves, the podcast. Also, Dremio is going to be visible at all these events. So if you're at Big Data and AI Paris in September, Big Data London also in September, Coalesce by DBT in October, CDO in August, or at the TDBI panel, Thursday, August 17th. If you're at any of these events, go check out the Dremio booth where you can get some cool swag and meet some cool people. So we'll see you there. And with no further ado, let's get on to our feature presentation. We're going to be talking about building the next generation data platform for supply chain with Dremio's Data Lakehouse and GenerativeAI. With us today is going to be Mark Sear, Director of Data Analytics and AI/ML at Maersk, and Tomer Shiran, Co-founder and Chief Product Officer of Dremio. Mark, Tomer, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Alex. It's great to be on your show here, and of course, Mark, thanks for joining. Maybe let's start with some some background about yourself, about the Maersk. I know many people have seen, I'm sure, their containers all over the place. So tell us more about the company, maybe.
Yeah, containers are part of Maersk. We're actually moving now from being 100% focused on shipping to the full end-to-end logistics. So that's everything from what you might say like factory gate to the consumer. It's a change. It's a rapid change, but it means fundamentally offering more value for our customers end to end. It's what the customer wants. It's our strategy. And also we are launching a whole series of zero carbon initiatives. Our first vessel, believe it or not, I think it set sail this morning, running on green methanol. So zero carbon footprint, which if you consider in the past, and indeed largely today, ocean transport has been somewhat polluting. We're moving to make it zero polluting. So leaders in many areas.
And that's cool given the scale, right? I understand over 900 vessels and offices in over 100 different countries. And
800 vessels, I think it's now 800 vessels, 120 odd countries, ports, offices. Yeah, it is colossal. Over 100,000 people work for the organization. So yeah, it's astonishing. You think of some of those big ships contain or will transport 18,000 containers. So that's 18,000. I think in America you would call them semi trucks. 18,000 in one go, and there's about 11 people on board those ships. So, although we're supposed to call them vessels, I keep calling them ships. But there we go. So yeah,
what do you call the semis in the UK?
We call them Arctics, articulated lorries.
Ah, okay,
cool. Why?
So we're talking data here, and of course, any operation at this scale, and especially in the area of supply chain and logistics, there have to be all sorts of opportunities when it comes to kind of using data to make things more efficient, or reducing costs, increasing business velocity. So maybe you can just kind of give us an overview of kind of some of the opportunities that you see and that you're pursuing.
Well, I think it's data's everywhere, and it's right at the center of what we want to do now. And I think if you consider the life of a product, and let's do one from China to the UK, just as simple. Think about everything that goes into getting that well, let's take an example, this mouse. What goes into getting this mouse from China to the UK? You've got a production schedule. Then you've got to work out, how do you get it from the factory to the port to the next port, the port to the warehouse to the consumer. So there's vast amounts of data points throughout that. And every single data point is actually pretty much an opportunity for improvement for both sides. We can improve our profitability, our knowledge, our ability to price correctly, our ability to staff correctly. But also, what's critical to us is the customer. The customer is truly the king of our business. They need to know, or queen, they need to know, when is this mouse actually going to be available to me? Because there's no point me listing it on Amazon or saying it's going to be in my store or put it on my website if that ship turns up 6 weeks late, or the container gets to the port just as the ship leaves, because there's no way you're throwing it onto a ship from even 1 meter, let alone a kilometer after it leaves. So a lot of that is about visibility. A lot of it is about us sharing our data, partnering with our customers to make sure they can see where the vessels are, when they're turning up. Because again, you think about it, 18,000 containers turn up at a port. Think of how long a convoy of 18,000 vehicles is to unload that ship. Now, if they all turn up at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, you can imagine 18,000 semi-trucks in a line, not a pretty sight. So there's a lot of data to make sure they know it's going to be 2 days before your container's unloaded, pick it up at gate 27, et cetera, et cetera. So the opportunities are kind of as endless as data. And you will have heard of the phrase, of course, data is the new oil. Actually, it isn't. I've always said data is the new solar, because it just goes on and on and on. Oil runs out, it's finite. Data isn't. That's how we see it.
And it's probably growing, right? As you instrument more things, and just everything is more and more online, and
more things are instrumented. More people want to know data. The consumers are a lot more savvy than they were 4 or 5 years ago. I've only been in Maersk for 3.5 years, but even in that time, customers used to say, just when is my container arriving? And now they kind of like to know, when is it arriving, within what time frame? How is it getting there? Is it going to be carbon neutral? Can I put it on a low carbon neutral route, send it the lowest carbon footprint way, etc.? So it's a function of everybody maturing about data. Private lives, we all matured about data in our private lives as well as in our business life, right?
Yeah. So your architecture now, when it comes to data and data infrastructure, of course, is evolving, and that's why we're talking here. But maybe we can start by just give us a little bit of details on what it looked like, before, what it's been like, how things were built.
Okay, so go back 3.5 years when I joined. Our CTIO, Navneet Kapoor, awesome guy, came up with a new vision to move us forward with data, to move us forward infrastructure-wise, etc. We had a whole bunch of legacy stuff. We had Teradata, big Teradata estate. I think it was actually one of the biggest in Europe, Teradata estate. We had not everything in the cloud. Lots of things were simply not in the cloud. We also had Palantir. And so he kicked off this journey of, let's make things simpler, let's make things work better, and let's make the end user experience better. So we started the journey towards that, then decomming all the old systems, moving towards data lake, initially constructed and still held even to this day on Microsoft Azure, which very scalable, very accessible, etc., but still lacking that little bit of I suppose we could call it user friendliness at that stage for users. So then the question becomes, how do we make data ubiquitous? How do we deliver it into the hands of everybody? And how do we do that? it's pretty crucial to do it cost effectively, right? Otherwise, you know, if your cost of your data lake balloons, then you're probably not in a better situation than you were with Teradata, for example. So we did that, and then we waited and rather fortuitously came across Dremio and piloted it, proof of concepted it. Yeah, it's cool. It's good.
So you talked about some of the requirements being, you know, has to be cost efficient. The TCO has to be kind of enable a broad set of users to kind of achieve maybe more self-service. Were those the key requirements? Were there other requirements that were important when you were thinking about this new kind of architecture?
The number one key requirement is let's give people access. Let's make sure that people can get used to data, because there's no point in having a data lake if you, in effect, to use the analogy, restrict those people that can fish. If you have to be a technical genius to use it, or if you have to know the ins and outs of security to use it, it's not a data lake. It's just a walled garden, and you can talk about it, but you're not going to get a lot of use out of that. TCO is one thing. Also, for us, really crucial is let's build on open standards. Let's build on open source. Let's make sure everything we do is open. We don't want to be locked in. Probably many of the people on this podcast have used Teradata, and it's been a great product, a great servant, but you kind of, I would contend, somewhat locked into it. It's not easy to move. By putting our data in open formats and plopping a query engine on top of it, if we wanted to, we could move fairly rapidly from Dremio to, I don't know, maybe Trino with a security layer or whatever we want to do. So for us, it's important that we don't box ourselves in and make those architectural decisions that mean we're locked in for a decade. And Dremio, you guys have been incredibly open about that, and you've adopted open source. You've really helped us on our journey towards Iceberg, which we think is spectacularly important. And yeah, that's where we are.
And is security an important kind of criteria? Maybe data governance, or is that something you care about in your world?
Me personally, I couldn't care less. No, yeah, absolutely, it's essential. I mean, if you think about the people that we're moving goods for, you should not and you cannot break those Chinese walls. If you happen to be moving for Nike and Puma and Adidas, your Adidas salesman shouldn't know what the Nike salesman knows or whatever. So for us, that fine granular security is really super important. And of course, those models, they're quite complex to build. So, you know, you've got this sort of equation of, do I build it in-house or do I go to someone that's built it and prove it? And we chose to go down that route for the next period of time, and we'll see what comes out. I think if you haven't got a highly secure environment these days, you're going to have really deep problems fairly quickly.
Yeah. And where's all this data coming from? Like before it gets to the lake, like where is it? What systems or what platforms?
It's coming from all over the place. Some from SAP, some from Salesforce. I guess that doesn't surprise too many people. You hear those two big names out there. We've also got what we call platform teams, and that's not platform in the sense of the way that a lot of people think about platforms. A platform supports a specific business function. So very vertically focused, but tightly horizontally integrated. So we're moving to an entirely event-driven, API-driven environment so that people exchange messages from these things, moving away from the big monoliths that we've had in the past of a sort of a giant SQL database in the middle and a million people trying to work out what to do with it. So it comes from all over the place. Even from, you know, when you see containers on the back of trucks and they've got those little freezer units on them, well, the little freezer units themselves, actually, of course, if you're shipping a number of tons of, let's say, meat from Argentina to, I don't know, McDonald's in New York or whatever. I don't know if we do that, but let's say we do. It's got to be frozen. So even those freezers that are on board the vessels will be sending data to say what's happening. So you've got a whole bunch of stuff. The data's coming from everywhere. Cranes in dockyards, people walking around dockyards so they don't get squished by automated machines driving around 20, 30 tons of material at a time. So yeah, data is everywhere. And I have to say, I love it.
that seems important, making sure people don't get squished. That's a good use case for cool. What kind of on the analytics side, on the kind of end user side, what kind of use cases are they? Primarily, BI workloads, or you're starting to see, we hear a lot of folks these days experimenting with Gen AI and LLMs on that kind of same data once you have this kind of a platform. So what are you seeing in the organization? Who's taking advantage of it? Where is that going also?
So I think it comes as no surprise that the bulk of workloads that we see at the moment are quasi-traditional BI. So we're moving away from old tooling. We've got a whole bunch of Power BI out there. And that would probably be in the traditional pyramid. That would be the bulk. And I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody. And I'm sure if you go to most organizations, that's the case. But what Navneet has said is he wants us to be leading lights in AI, LLMs, the whole box and dice of AI. So if you take AI as machine learning, AI, and LLMs, and we're doing a whole bunch of work in that area. For example, we've built our own little, I guess you'd call it generative AI type product that allows people to type natural English questions against Dremio, and will return result sets to them per their question. It'll also chart it. We've got that. We've got people now starting to get into rudimentary, what I would call business science, and that's really where you sit a data scientist with the business and start to come up with algos. So to models that will predict who is the best salesperson to take on this type of account. When is this vessel likely to arrive? How do we move things around? And in fact, we've got a digital twin of a number of our ports now as well that help optimize how the ports work. So things are fast. It's kind of like, I don't know if you follow the Tour de France, but I think if you imagine going up the Alpe d'Huez, which is a pretty steep mountain, how you feel at the top, if only you were allowed to turn around and go down at high speed instead of keep going, which of course the poor Tour de France guys do. But it now feels like we're not at the top of the mountain, but we can at least see the top, and we can imagine how great it's going to be when we come down the other side. So we're getting to that stage now. We're starting to see those exciting use cases crop up in the field of AI modeling and large language modeling. So it's an exciting place to be in.
Cool. No, I've actually been at Alpe d'Huez. It was in the winter though, and it was mostly going downhill. I was getting some assistance on the way up.
You're on skis. You weren't cycling up. You should have been cycling.
No, that seems not sure that would be a good fit for my my abilities, but I get the analogy. Very cool. So right before we started this webinar, you were showing me kind of a screen of that internal application. I thought it would be cool. I don't know if that's something you could show us.
Let me just see if I can do that. I don't see why not. No, I can't show you obviously any of the answers to the questions, because that would be just showing people our business. But data query, we've got a few hundred users on it now. It's in pilot. It's going to go full live about start of September, hopefully 1st of September. These are the sort of questions that people can ask it. What have been the 5 most profitable routes in the last 6 months? Now, if you imagine the sequel to build that can be quite complex, but you don't have to be smart to type that in. Okay, so all the clever stuff is done behind the hood, and it will bring back to you, obviously, a table of results there. This same large language model we're actually also using to show data that's internal data. So show me the Java code to extract a vessel. What is a truck? Believe it or not, there's some people, that's a very specific definition, a truck versus a semi versus etc. What are the 20 most profitable routes? How many bookings were there by operator in 2022? Show a total and broken down by reefer and non-reefer. Reefer is the containers with the freezers and not freezers. So you can see there you're getting some pretty deep questions that you can ask without having to learn SQL. And that to me means several things. I mean, the primary thing is it means we can, not saying de-skill, but we can upskill our users. Because why should they have to learn SQL in order to access their data? I don't think you should, right? I mean, if I want to use my vehicle, I don't have to know how to get oil out of the ground and then build a calefraction tower, refine it, etc. I just want to put it in my car and go. And if you think about what most business users want, they want to put the answer to those business questions in their hands and go. And that's what we're all about doing now, is doing that at that level, and then bringing in the AI modeling on top of the lake, allowing the data to speak to the users without them having to know what's happening. So in the background, really working on those types of problems for them.
Yeah, so there's definitely a theme here of kind of democratizing, and that was, as you mentioned, the reason, or one of the reasons for deploying Dremio and just kind of making data more self-service, putting it in the hands of more people. Obviously, going and enabling people to ask natural language questions, continues with that theme. Let me ask you about kind of the total cost of ownership, TCO. In general, you went from kind of legacy platforms to a modern platform. How do you think about that kind of the cost savings and what that does for the business, going from like data warehouse to kind of lake or Lakehouse?
I think that's a really interesting question, and we may not be far enough ahead to really know the true TCO. Mm-hmm. But to me, and this is a personal opinion, TCO is almost the wrong calculation to use, because how can you put a cost and say, what is my cost of ownership for a query or a solution that you couldn't do before that you can now, that may bring you $100 million of business? So if I said to you in your position as, are you CTO? You're CTO, right? It's CTO. If I said to your CEO, I'm going to charge you, you're going to have $1 million cost of ownership for this new mouse, but you're going to double your revenue. He's not going to worry about that TCO. He's going to worry about, wow, I just doubled my revenue because I bought Tomer a new mouse. And that, I think, is what we need to do here, is kind of get people thinking about the right equation and thinking about, what am I delivering, and am I delivering it at optimal cost? So it's not about the total cost, it's about the optimal cost of ownership for me. It's a conversation I think needs to happen in a very widespread way across our industry.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are also, as you modernize kind of the stack here, that people element is probably important as well, right? Not just talking about the people that are consuming data, but just how do you go through a transition in a large company, right? What are some of the kind of lessons learned, the best practices maybe for folks in the audience, just based on your own experience?
I think the best practice is to trust your people. When we started to pivot our technologies, we were very open that we were starting to move things, and there's a whole bunch of our guys down in Bangalore, and of course UK and Denmark as well, and pretty much to a person, everybody said, yeah, cool, let's change. We trusted them to learn, we gave them the skills to learn, and I think they trusted that the tech would deliver, that those decisions were being made. And like everything else in life, if you've got a good leader, and Navneet is superb articulating what he wants, what the vision is. If you've got that good leadership, it's really important. It makes things easier. And the key thing is, you have to have a clear, articulated vision. If you just turn up with like, oh yeah, here's this new tech over here, give it a go, that's never going to cut it, because people, how do they buy into that message? You can only buy into it by being encouraged to try it, see it work, pick it up, start to move in that direction, and be on a really clear, almost like a on rails decision, where you can't just turn right and say, oh, I'll get off the train, or I don't want to do it. You've got to have that clear, articulated vision. Mm-hmm. That would be one of my lessons. The second lesson I would say is, if you sign up with a vendor, make sure that you can absolutely trust them and don't waste their time or your time. Don't absolve yourself from your level of responsibility when you're implementing. Make sure you go to them only with questions that you actually need to have answered, not questions that you think you'd like to have answered. So I think there's a phrase in English which may not translate to American or any other language, which is physician heal thyself. And it basically means take care of yourself, right? Don't come to me that just heal yourself. And that's my approach of my guys is if you get super stuck, ask for help. If not, figure it out. Take responsibility for yourself, bootstrap yourself, take advantage of all the things that are out there and collaborate. So I don't think they're necessarily any different lessons than with anything else, but be free and be open because boy, things are changing fast and they're going to continue to change fast.
What talking about kind of changing fast, and I see we have a bunch of good questions coming in from the audience. So one last question from me before we dive into that. Where are things heading in your world of supply chain and logistics? There's so much changing we see now in the world with AI and LLMs, and they're becoming pervasive. My kids using them now, it seems, every day when they're not when it's not summer vacation for school stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean,
where's
the
yeah.
the world has changed, right? People are not going to be able to, schools are not going to be able to set essays anymore. That's dead, right? If you're a school that's setting essays, you're in the wrong place already, because you're going to get your answers from one LLM or another, or you'll get it from one and you'll do page milling and put it into another to say reauthor it, so you can't trace the types of phrases. Very simple. Idea. Yeah, it's exactly how to do it. That's how a lot of news stories are written these days. So way to go, right? I think the differentiators that we have are we have a scale, we have an end-to-end vision. So people will want to know more real time where things are. Now, if you think if you've got ships doing one part, a second person doing a bit of trucking, a third person doing warehousing, you've got yourself quite a big integration job there to know what is happening across this whole supply chain. One of the things that we're going to do is stitch that together, and we are stitching it together so people will know where everything is at one time. And that is a big challenge for us. And then, of course, as I said before, we've all seen what's been the temperature. Well, I was going to say the temperatures around the world, apart from the UK, where it's chucked it down with rain also, which is depressing. Yeah, we've all seen what's happening to temperatures. The climate situation is now becoming clear that people want to change, and we're reacting very, very quickly to that by putting out our methanol ships. So the first one, you'll see it. I think it arrives in Copenhagen in 6 weeks. So I'm sure that will make news headlines. Worth seeing, looks amazing, and zero pollution. What doesn't get any better, right? So for us, the challenge is help the climate, help the planet, help our customers, and full steam ahead, so to speak. Our strap line is all the way, and that is what we're doing. And everybody in tech, we're going all the way to deliver for our customers, both internal and external.
Cool. Well, I'll pass this now to Alex. He can help us with some of these questions that are coming in. No, you're on mute, Alex.
Oh, the mute button. But here we go. I want to say, first off, I want to say thank you to both of you for being on the show this week. This was an absolutely fascinating conversation and very enlightening one. So thank you very much for that. But we got a lot of interest from the audience. And again, if anyone else has any other questions, do put them either in the Q&A box or in the chat, and I will start passing them along. Okay, so our first question is about someone who's kind of in the same position where they're trying to create something similar for their firm, as far as like the chat application. They just want to know if there was any advice on like sort of where to begin and how to start looking into that.
Yeah, just pop me a message. We'll collaborate with you. We'll give you some code. Why not? This is open source, right? Nobody, we're not going to give you anything that's going to be a massive. Well, I'm not going to give you anything that will be of any commercial sensitivity, but we'll collaborate with you. Get in touch with whoever your Dremio rep is, put them in touch, and we'll gladly have a hour-long meeting with you, showing you how we approached it. Maybe even share some code that's not that's not obviously commercially sensitive. So yeah, no worries. We'll do that for you with greatest of pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And then next question is, do you use Dremio for data engineering, like creating tables, etc., or primarily for querying?
I think it would be fair to say that Initially, it started off as just for querying, because we had kind of a legacy cloud environment, which it sounds crazy, but things were moving so quickly, we just did. So initially it was just that. Now we've got a full dev, test, prod, promoted by GitHub events that take you through all of that. We're now starting to see people create tables, create a whole bunch of the, what's the correct term in Dremio, reflections, things like that, to speed up queries. So we're now actually starting to see people, data engineers, use it as an environment and building pipelines in it as well. Because a lot of pipelines, people think, oh, I'll build them in Spark or I'll build them in something complex. Most pipelines are actually relatively simple. So we're now starting to see that. Why? Because it's a lower cost of ownership for us. And that's what we want. We want the lowest, most cost-effective environment that delivers the results that we need for our business. So yeah, that's the journey we've been on.
Awesome. And then I'll follow up to that question is, do you use something like dbt to manage the SQL for these pipelines?
I'm not going to lie, I don't use it on a day-to-day basis, but again, if you squirt me an email or whatever, you're welcome to have a chat with my team on that. No problem at all, as a separate spin out, or we'll either email you or tell you. So I apologize, I can't answer that.
All good. Okay, here, this one's a bit of a longer one, so here we go. We've been told you use Power BI as your main reporting tool. Could you tell us about your experience with PBI tabular models, aka datasets that are based on Dremio data source in direct query mode? We've been struggling for over a year to get good performance on large data and non-trivial tabular models. Even with the best reflections and sub-second Dremio response time to every query, PBI often generates a dozen queries for one PBI visual that are sent to sequentially. There are some features that Microsoft is releasing to compensate for this: horizontal fusion, dynamic M parameters, direct query. I guess bottom line is any best practice when using like Power BI to get a little bit more juice out of it?
I think it kind of depends on what I mean, you know, how big is a piece of string? Without knowing the data sets, that's kind of a bit of an odd question to ask. I suppose I would say use less data. To be honest with you, without seeing the data, again, open offer. We're about collaboration. You can speak to my guys directly. No problem at all. We'll do that for you with the greatest of pleasure. So I know that sounds like a bit of deflection, but I don't want to sit here and say, if you index the third column, you'll find it all works, because I simply don't know if that's true. Although you could try it.
Or the fourth.
Yeah.
Or the fourth.
The next question is just sort of like a confirmation of sort of the architecture. So they're saying, okay, it's an LLM plus Dremio plus ADLS. Is that the general sort of architecture of this? It's
Azure ADLS with Iceberg on top of it, and then to the side of it, we've got an OpenAI model that's it's a hosted model ourselves via Microsoft. We bounce our queries off of that, because obviously you don't want queries or data, anything leaving our environment. So we basically use that to generate the SQL. We apply the SQL, drop it into Dremio, it comes back the results. Bada bing,
awesome.
Bada bosh.
Got it. And I think there was a follow-up to that question, which is being wanting to see, and again, if you can specify which LLM model of the OpenAI ones you're using. I don't know if that's...
we've got Turbo, 3.5 Turbo, and we're moving to 4. We're testing 4 at the moment.
Okay, awesome. And let's see here. Oh, sorry. The next question is the platform on cloud or on-prem? If it's on cloud, is it self-managed or fully managed like a cloud, like a Dremio cloud?
We've got a really cool, very good cloud team as part of the area that I work, which is called TSE, Technical Service Engineering. They manage it for us. We've built our own K8s clusters. So we spin up a K8s cluster with Dremio on it. That's fully managed for us, and the rest of the lake is Azure, and we manage it ourselves. And to be really honest, that's not because we don't want to use external clouds, but our security requirements are extraordinarily tight because we move goods around for so many people, and we don't want that to leave our own cloud. So nothing against the Dremio version, which I'm sure is pretty nice. A biggest compliment there. I don't know what it's like.
Next one is, how are you exploding geographical data with Dremio?
How are we exploding geographical data?
I guess more like, do you have geospatial data in your data sets in Dremio, and I guess how are you using them? I don't know. I could go in many different ways.
We tend not to have any geospatial data in it. We don't really have a lot of need for it, is my guess. But I haven't seen any anyway. Put it that way. So we have coordinates data, obviously, and we're looking at the moment in one area at what 3 words for really precise location, because what 3 words gives you, like, I think it's 3 meters square of everywhere, and it's words, it's not coordinates, because I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't find my way to -50.00 comma. Not anymore. I could in the days of a military sat nav, but not anymore. So what 3 words will be there, but if there's geospatial data there, I don't know about it. I apologize.
What are the alternative technologies which were evaluated? Are there any other open platforms on similar lines? What made you go with Dremio? What was the it factor that sold you?
Well, I think this is an interesting one. There's clearly a lot of technologies out there. There are technologies which do similar but use proprietary formats and are hugely expensive, and charge on a consumption basis. We didn't want a consumption model because we don't want a model based on, well, how much money you're going to make out of this use case. Because if I buy a car from Mercedes, I don't expect Mercedes to say, well, what are you doing with this car? And I say, oh, I'm going to transport the king, and they say, oh, well, it's, in that case, it's $1 million. Or I'm taking Jay-Z, well, it's $5 million. I don't want that model, and we don't want a model where you pay by consumption, because again, the more successful we are, the more we will use. Why would I wish to pay I think it was Warren Buffett who says the best business in the world is a toll booth on a road, right? I don't want to pay that toll booth every time I run a query. So those would be the dollar factors. The technical factors, we tested it. It's super robust. And then there are soft factors. And I think the soft factors that people often forget, and they forget because they're quite hard to quantify. What is the company actually like to work with? And I think that's a differentiating factor that not many people have. Like, I've very lucky, my sales guy, account manager, whatever his title is, Jamie, he's the sort of guy I can text at 10 o'clock at night and say, I've just had a user complain to me. What's going down? And at 11 o'clock at night, he'll have sobered up and he'll text me the answer, and he'll go that extra mile. And that means a lot to me. You don't want to be doing business with 9-to-5 companies. I also want access to the senior people in the company. This is a personal thing, because I like to know where is the roadmap and I like to affect it. And I've been very lucky to have had several meetings with Tomer, and I think we've at least allowed them to shape shift what they do slightly to cater for things we need. And those are all the soft things that people forget. Do business with, ultimately humans don't do business with purchase orders or checks or whatever. You do business with other human beings. And I would say that in my experience, it's the exact opposite than gnarly doing business with Dremio. It's pretty smooth. I used to surf a lot in Australia, and it's the equivalent to laying on a completely becalmed thing on your board, just knowing there's no waves coming along. But when a wave does come along, very reactive. So there you go. That's end to end the journey.
Awesome. Love that. Next question. How would the data modeling techniques like Data Vault, et cetera, will help replacing Power BI modeling? How are these different?
I think Power BI modeling is not truly about modeling. It's about assembling large, flat tables of data, and modeling in a more flexible manner is what we're all about. We want people to be able to ask any question, not the question that you've predetermined fits into a dimensional model. Yeah. So for me, as we spoke about democratizing data, for me, it's actually more about empowering people. It's about putting everything in the hands of the business, not saying, oh, you have to come back to us if you want another column put into that because only we know how to do it. Or conversely, hey, let's let everybody create models and we'll have 1,000 duplicates around the place. It's about just putting that little bit of thought in there. And it's a moving feast, right? You have to be aware of what people want all the time. So just slightly different.
Awesome. Great slot. I'm a consultant at Stena and chosen Dremio as data management platform. Worked a lot with Maersk in a previous role. Thanks. So I think that was just a thank you. So,
oh, that's great. If you work for Stena, I'm going to be driving to France. If you've got any discount codes for ferries, no, I'm only joking.
That's awesome. Okay. Next question. Oh, this one's kind of out of scope. So right now we're not doing any kind of performance benchmarks here. We'll probably have other videos where we, or other episodes where we'll talk about, things like different platforms versus Dremio and whatnot. Can you explain contributions of Dremio to data product and data mesh practice? Does it have every kind of native adapter for connecting to various databases?
It has the bulk of them. Our one particular one that we are missing, which we had a meeting on last week, and this will give you an example as well, say work with a company that's flexible, is Kafka. We're looking for a Kafka adapter. We met with Kafka wasn't prioritized until end of the year, but we want Kafka now. So we had a meeting last week to kick off the Kafka project. That's the only thing I can see that is missing from our environment. We've got pretty much every relational database we use. Obviously, you've got flat files or that sort of stuff. SAP HANA, I think, is on the roadmap. We'll look at that when we don't need to look at that until Q4. But yeah, pretty much everything. There's nothing I can think of that makes me jump up and down. And if there was, I wouldn't hold back in telling Tomer. So
awesome. Okay, just that's most of the questions, but I do want to ask one last thing. Like people are listening, they're probably hearing and they're being like, okay, this is an exciting thing to kind of get started with. If someone is looking to sort of get in touch with Dremio and start making those first steps, what do you think would be sort of like from your experience, like the best first step to start like evaluating Dremio and start thinking about how it fits into their data story?
Well, I think there's two ways to go. The classic way to go is to, get hold of a test edition and just play with it yourself. For me, I prefer to do a little bit more research first. So I would go almost the traditional route, get a non-disclosure agreement, sit down, talk about what you actually want to achieve. And to be blunt, Dremio do seem to just treat that as a cost of sales, right? Don't listen to everything, all that glistens is not gold, as they say. So be a bit cognizant that, of course, they're going to do that. Just follow the classic process. Ask for 2 or 3 reference calls. Make sure you understand it. Test it out. And if you get problems, ask them to solve those problems as part of your evaluation. So chuck something quite meaty at it, something you haven't done before. But before you do it, and this comes back kind of like to the classic wide table problem. Don't build a 200-column table and then say to whoever, Dremio or Databricks or anybody else, hold on, this doesn't perform. Ask them up front, what is the best way of achieving this solution with this as my data set? Just get that little bit of advice, because that way you're learning all the time, best practice for the product. And often people don't do that. They dive headlong in, think they know everything, and say, well, I used to do it like this on Teradata, so now I'm going to do it like this on Dremio, then wonder why it doesn't translate. There is, with every product, a learning process. Like if you're switching from a diesel vehicle to a electric vehicle, you have to start thinking of different things, right? With a diesel, you can drive it until the very last minute and pull over, fill up in 3 minutes and drive off. With an electric car, you've constantly got to be thinking, where am I going to fill up? How far can I go? When I get there, do I need a coffee for an hour while it fills up? Yada, yada, yada. So you need to think of it like that. As with any new technology, adapt yourself to the situation that you are likely to encounter with that new technology, and leverage the experts. You guys have got some good, like Dremio have got some really good technical people. Leverage them, put in a bit of time up front, then try it out, see what your users think. That's what we did. And at the end of the day, they liked it. It works. We're happy-ish. We're never going to be really happy. You let them know that. Never let your vendor know you're happy.
Fair.
Works
fair.
better for negotiations, of course.
I hate it.
A couple more questions came in. With no code prompt based queries and getting results from such queries, how are the results like checked to ensure that like the AI is returning like the right values metrics? Is there any like checking of what the response is?
Yeah, there's two things that happen. First of all, the way that we built it in Dremio is that when you submit your query, it submits with that query a predefined metadata structure. So we know that the answers that come back will work. There won't be a Cartesian product in there, or et cetera, et cetera. So we check that quite tightly. So by doing that, that eliminates a lot of it. Second check is always a really good one, which is the users, because the users are, I don't know about everybody else's users, but our guys are phenomenal. If you deliver them some wrong data, you're like, it's not going to be more than 4 or 5 nanoseconds before they say that data maybe it doesn't work or whatever. So that's the second way. And the third way is we store every query, then we actually look at those queries to see, right, is this a complex query? Why did that take so long to execute, et cetera, et cetera? So you start to get a good feeling from that. But primarily, you shouldn't get those problems because you're submitting the whole metadata of the underlying tables at the same time as you do it. So it's no really different than letting people do it themselves in SQL, right?
Perfect. Okay, final question. Great data points. In what time capsules and years do you envision your future state, and where do you see Maersk's roadmap? How do you administer the moving of 900 vessels in terms of lost connectivity in the deep sea? How do you manage it in real time?
Okay, so I'm clearly not a vessel. I'm not a ship's master or a vessel. It's not really my area of expertise. The one thing I would, in fact, to be honest with you, I'm quite nervous of the sea because it's quite big, which is, you know, like if you think about it, you can learn how to swim, but if your boat sinks in the Atlantic, you ain't swimming to Africa or America. You're fundamentally dead. So it's not my thing. But I would suggest that maybe Elon Musk holds the answer to data, right? I mean, I've got a Starlink satellite that is it's portable, number one. I can take it when I go down to my house in Italy. I can turn it on there. I've got full connectivity. I think the connectivity issues will disappear over the next 3 years. I think data is just going to grow and grow and grow. But I think the way that it's exploited will change. And I think you'll see the rise of AI, and the roles of every data engineer on the planet will change very significantly over the next 3 years. It will
Awesome.
be, the question I get asked a lot is, am I going to lose my job to AI? And the answer, I think, is if you don't embrace AI and what is happening and the new techniques that are out there, you will not lose your job to AI, but you will lose your job to a human that has embraced AI. And that's where I think the whole thing will go. I think you'll see, as I say, data engineering change radically. Those of you who don't believe me, have a look at a product called Notable. Just see how fast that generates Python code for you and the things you can do. It's mind-blowing. We're just looking to plug that in right now into Dremio. And the role of a data scientist has already changed overnight with that one tool. So be aware of what's coming. I'm 59 in a couple of weeks, so, you know, who knows if I even have a future.
Well,
he looks 30, but it's all those Alpe d'Huez climbs, you know.
He's been doing. Yeah.
Yes.
I wish I did.
Well, that brings us to the end of our program. I want to say again, thank you both for being here this week. It was a wonderful conversation, and early happy birthday.
Yes.
And again, everyone come back next week. Next week will be Apache Iceberg office hours. So again, Apache Iceberg was part of this story today. So if you want to learn more about how you can implement Apache Iceberg and have any questions about doing so, come back next week. We got some answers for you. But again, thank you, Mark and Tomer, and I'll see everyone next week.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.